The year's 1198 AD. Pope Innocent III just took power in the Vatican and talks about the Fourth Crusade beginning. Now, Crusades have been going on for the past 100 years, and in order to take these sites, the main site being Jerusalem, they realized that Egypt is funneling a lot of armies into there. So Pope Innocent III's idea is to take Egypt by way of sea. And a little background on Constantinople. Massive city, but is having a little bit of a leader issue going on right now. Alexis III just overthrew Isaac II. Now, because of a loophole in the concept of becoming a king, Alexis III imprisons Isaac II and also blinds him, because apparently you can't be a king that's blind. Now, his son, who is also imprisoned with him, somehow escapes this, makes his way to the Pope via a French king, and tells about his story. Now, the Pope looks at this and says, I could do this or I couldn't, but he sees a friendship in Constantinople. Constantinople has always been a Christian city and still remains one of the most profitable cities for them. So he thinks, okay, if I put this kid back in power, I get a great ally, I get strategic positioning, and he's probably going to pay me a good chunk of change to do this for him. Pope Innocent III has his eyes set on Egypt, but he still needs a couple things here, right? He needs a boat. He needs armies. He needs a lot of people. But luckily, the church has the money to pay for this, or at least we think. So Geoffrey of Villena-Hardin, which is the Marshal of Champagne, decides to approach an individual named Dodge Dandolo in Venice. Now, Dodge is known for having tons of ships. So they make a deal for 59 war galley ships for roughly 34,000 men, and also pick up a debt of 84,000 marks for them. So as everybody's getting ready in Venice, all the ships are getting built, all the men are trying to get recruited, this outside issue comes up. The Pope says, we need to make sure we put this kid in power. Not only do we need to put him in power, we need to make sure that he stays in power, because we need him as an ally. And also he told us he's going to pay this 84,000 marks, which if the church doesn't have to spend the money, why should we have to? So he sends Alexius IV down to Venice in order to kind of catch a ride with them, hoping that it's going to be a quick and painless campaign. So as the Venetians finish up the ships, Dodge Dandolo, the leader, comes up to the Crusaders and says, all right, your boats are ready. Where are your men? Where are your money? The issue is the Crusaders have neither. They've raised about 10,000 men at this point, and they have nowhere near the money, partially because Alexius promised that the money would be there whenever they take Constantinople. This doesn't fly with Dodge. Dodge says that if you guys conquer the city of Zara, we'll kind of help you guys along and almost forget the debt. The issue is that Zara is a fellow Christian city and has never given any issues to the Pope. So a Christian crusade attacking a Christian city doesn't fare well with the men at all. Now at this point, greed's kind of taken over. The crusade doesn't really have a choice, so they go to Zara. It takes them about 14 days to get the siege over with. And they really kind of attack the Christian town on the basis of money, which doesn't really fly with the Pope. It doesn't really fly with any of the people either. Pope comes back and says, all right, the Venetians are excommunicated. This wasn't part of the deal. It wasn't right for them to press that on you, and nearly excommunicates the entire crusade because of the matter as well. Now that the dirty deed was done in Zara, people felt really terrible at this point. Things were awkward between the Crusaders and the Venetians. Everybody just want to kind of get it done. So as they approach Constantinople, they're hoping that they can place Alexius IV in front of their people where they can see him, and a popular uprising will occur, and they won't really have to do anything, and they can move directly onto Egypt. Doesn't really go that way for them. The people see them, the response is less than overwhelming, and eventually, near the seawall, the soldiers begin to shoot arrows at them, so they have to turn the boat around and come to the consensus that they're going to have to fight. Now, Constantinople is a pretty difficult town to take. It's a three-sided peninsula with a seawall, a land wall, and pretty much every difficulty you could ever think about on a three-sided peninsula. Luckily, though, Alexius III has kind of drained the army. He lined his pocket with a lot of the boats, so the boats are pretty barren, and there's not a whole lot in terms of offense. So they kind of take a defensive route, while the Venetians and the Crusaders decide to go their separate ways. The Venetians stay on the boat, and they say, we've got the seawall. Now, the seawall is about a mile long, and it's pretty heavily fortified. Now, the Crusaders are going to take the beach. They're going to start in Galata and then work their way through the Golden Horn, ending up on the shores. So zoom in onto the seawall. The Venetians capture the wall pretty heavy-handedly using assault bridges and other things. They take it, and then they start setting buildings on the other side on fire in order to kind of distract and also to destroy the town at the same time. Now zooming onto the shore. The things aren't really going well for the Crusaders at this point. They've been pushed back by Alexius III, and they're kind of getting overran. But luckily the Venetians see this. They drop their post on the wall because they've already kind of won, and they decide to help the Crusaders. They bring some reinforcements down, and this really kind of frustrates Alexius III. They're pushed back all the way to the city. They don't necessarily take the city quite yet. But Alexius III is frustrated by all of this. And he decides to just kind of get on out of there. He just flees during the night with his mistress and one of his daughters. So now that Alexius III is fled, Alexius IV takes control pretty easily. There's no defenses to kind of stop him, so they just march in and give him the throne. He frees his father, Isaac II, but then takes the kingship for himself and begins to head to the bank to repay the debts that he promised. Now, once he makes it to the bank, Alexius IV realized that awkwardly his predecessor drank the bank. So he can't really pay his debts to the Crusaders. This is a very big issue for him. So the concept that Alexius IV couldn't repay his debts didn't really go over well with the Crusaders. They spent all this time trying to get him in power and hoped that they could pay him, but he never could. So they have to kind of do something. The Crusaders begin to riot against the cities, and the people don't really take that too well. So they begin to riot back. One of these riots leads into a massive fire, and after this, the Crusaders just kind of back off, and they return to the camp outside the city, realizing that they messed up. So while all this is going on, the city's not happy, nobody's happy in the town. Alexius IV's advisor, Mortzaflos, decides to trap, kidnap, and imprison Alexius IV, overtake the throne, and then eventually just kind of kill Alexius IV so that he doesn't have this issue. His father, Isaac II, as well, died during this time. So now Mortzaflos, who recently just came into power as Alexius V, doesn't really like what he's seeing at this point. Everybody's kind of attacking. He's losing the town again. So he just decides to do what the last guy did and just kind of get out of there before things get too bad for him. Now that all the drama's been done and they realize that this whole mission was kind of a flop, Alexius V has fled. There's no resistance there to kind of stop them. So both the Crusaders and the Venetians go into the town and kind of just take everything and leave. They need to repay their debts to the Venetians. They need enough money to go back, and they're really just kind of hoping for a little bit of jingler in their pocket at this point. Now, after 3 days of being ransacked by the Crusaders and the Venetians, everything in the city's kind of gone. There's no leader. Everybody's left. It's just burnt buildings and stuff all over the streets. Constantinople never really comes back from this, and the Fourth Crusade is kind of chalked up to a hard L at this point. All the drama, everything happened, and they just decided to go back to the Vatican and, I guess, hope for praises that they're not going to be excommunicated. Now, throughout the Crusades, a lot of good things happen and a lot of bad things happen. The Fourth Crusade was one of those terrible things that happened. The concept of money floated along and just kind of made everything terrible. The original plan was to go from Venice, get some boats, have a great time, go to Egypt, mess some people up, take some Holy Land back for Christians, but none of that ever happened. Once money became a factor, the Venetians told them, hey guys, we're not going to do this for free, but we want this town. And the Crusaders didn't really have an option because they were going off a promise from a kid who knew nothing, and they take this town, which is a complete unholy act, which ends up excommunicating the Venetians. Then once they get to the town, Alexius III leaves. Alexius IV gets in power but quickly dies. Alexius V leaves, so there's nobody to stop the town. Now, the Venetians can do whatever the Venetians want, so they begin ransacking the town, and then the Crusaders just play along. They need money and they want something to have to go back to. So they begin just utter chaos in this Christian town, and it's almost friendly fire going on. And it's just absolutely incredible that the point of money and greed took a hold of these crusaders whose holy vow was to stop the Muslim power, but instead stop one of their biggest allies just in the promise of money.